About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Good morning, all. Hello, I am Tabitha Hassell at Tabs on Tap. Hopefully you guys are having a good morning. I had to start the show off with that. That was General Wesley Clark talking about how we, the United States, in the name of oil, of course, in the name of oil, disguised as many, many other things, decided to take down, I'm going to read those names again: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Well, guess what? We've taken all of the others down. Iran is the only one left. But is it about oil, or is it about regime change? Is it about nuclear weapons? We'll be talking about that a little bit more. I want to talk about some preparation today, what you can do to prepare. I don't think we all need to get too crazy and head for the hills at this point. Nothing has yet been decided. Donald Trump, of course, has approved the attack plan against Iran. It's been approved, but as of right now, he claims that he has not yet made the decision to strike. So I think we're inching towards that continuously. More, of course, missile attacks on both sides overnight, probably sealing the deal, but we've got Russia to contend with at this point. Good morning, Sherry. Good morning, Dottie. So we're going to talk about those things. I don't know what was going on yesterday with the show. I don't know if it was Restream, the service that I use, or an internet connection. Somebody was talking about solar storms, taking out the internet in some areas. I just have no idea. But what it was so weird, though, because, of all days, too, when we have Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard on, because I was so excited about him coming on. I've been waiting for him to be on the show for several days to talk. He didn't really spend a whole lot of time, though, talking about Iran. He probably maybe didn't want to get too far into it, but we'll talk to him again, see what he's got to think or what he's got to say. And right now, I don't really know that anyone has too much to say about it, because every day you just don't know. We're kind of in this waiting pattern. We see all these things happening. We know that Israel is showing restraint. They haven't wiped Iran off the face of the earth yet. It could happen. So it's, what can you say really at this point? But I was so excited to have him on. Then, of course, the Facebook stream wasn't working, and I have absolutely no idea why. When I set the show up, it was perfectly fine. And then midway through the show, we were kind of, towards the end, but there were some important things I still wanted to talk about. And then all of a sudden it was just gone. The show was just gone. It would not let me restart it. And now this morning, started up, everything's fine. And I don't know. I don't know. I see Sherry Adams. Good morning to you. You're on Facebook. So, Sherry, people in New York were celebrating the very people that screamed death to America. I saw that. I'm going to play a clip of that video, Sherry, here shortly. Good morning, Peggy. Because I did see that. It almost makes me feel like, I don't know about you guys. I'm in the in-between when it comes to Iran and Iraq, and we're going to get into that here in a few minutes. Not Iraq, good Lord. It needs to be Friday for me. I worked until midnight last night, so today hopefully won't be one of those days where I have my brain is just frazzled and not working. But we'll see what happens. But I meant Iran and Israel. Of course, I support Israel and their right to defend themselves. Iran, their regime, they're a bunch of terrorists. Of course, there's no way in a million years I could support the Iranian regime. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that I want the United States to join in this war, but that's just because I see the what comes after that. It's not as easy as just running in there with a bunker buster and oh, we're done. We did what we wanted to do. It's not how it works, and even more so as we get closer to taking that strike and we hear a little bit more from Russia and China. And good morning, Rob. Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Tammy, Jerry Hoover. Good morning, Pam. And yes, Pam, I'm here on Facebook. It worked out today. If you guys can't ever find me on Facebook, always look at YouTube and particularly X. X has never messed with the show. YouTube hasn't in quite some time. And I was kind of surprised because we've been talking about some touchy subjects as we're going to do today. So besides talking about Israel and Iran, some of the other things I'm going to touch base is the US dollar decreasing since the beginning of the year. I'm going to talk about Tyler Perry. Maybe that's why they took the show down yesterday. I want to talk about Obama, who has been implicated in the P. Diddy ongoing trial, attending parties. And we can just talk about that right now. In fact, I'm going to talk about the Genius Act also here in a couple of seconds about how Donald Trump's all about crypto. So we're going to be talking about that too. But I thought this was kind of interesting. The P. Diddy story continues to unfold, doesn't it? And late last night, I was reading how P. Diddy has implicated Barack Obama, claiming that Obama has attended at least 17 of these freak offs. So, maybe we've heard all these rumors about Michelle, and otherwise known as Michael, and Obama, fighting back and forth, potentially, heading towards divorce. Now, I've not seen, anything more about that, probably because I don't care. I don't look it up. Makes no difference to me what anyone does in their private lives. But a lot of people were speculating that Michelle was upset over that situation with Obama and the chef, the one that drowned, out there by Martha's Vineyard. Was it Martha's Vineyard, I believe? And where Obama was allegedly vacationing there and took the chef with him, and they were both out paddleboarding together. We've never heard the true story or what happened, but a lot of people speculated that's what Michelle was upset about. However, maybe it's upset because Obama was going to these freak offs. I've not heard Michelle's name mentioned that she was there. So we'll see where that goes. And Sherry says 17. Imagine that. Good morning, Linda. And Sherry, I like X, but there's no conversation there. I know, Sherry. That's the hard part. Good morning, Kim. And it's different for me because I see all your comments in one place. So I know Facebook is great when it comes to all of the comments and the conversation back and forth. And Sherry says it's not about them, it's about the children. You got that right. It is definitely about the children. Rob says YouTube's working. Glad to hear that, Sherry. We've got so many of them here. It will be a real battle. It has been saying this for 30 years about Iran. Also true. I'm not convinced that Iran has or is near to building a nuclear weapon, but I think Russia kind of they didn't reiterate that, but we'll talk about that, Russia's stance here in just a few minutes. But something I also wanted to jump in and talk about is Tyler Perry. I've got to be careful. I have contracts with different studios. I don't want to be bashing one of the clients. And I'm not bashing, it's just a newsworthy item. At this point, I would call it allegedly. You're not guilty, of course, until you've been convicted, innocent until proven guilty. So we don't really know. We know there's a lot of unscrupulous people out there who are also looking for money. Now, I know some people who work with Tyler Perry who work as producers and, production people, that type of thing. One guy is his really good friend. I've never heard a single bad thing about Tyler Perry. But now we have this actor. His name is Derek Dixon, and he's making some very serious allegations about Tyler Perry. And what he claims is that now he's an adult, he's not a child. Nobody's accusing Tyler Perry of harming children or doing any P. Diddy freak offs. I've not heard his name mentioned there. But what I am hearing is you know, with all this stuff going on, we've not been hearing a lot about it, but apparently Derek Dixon, who is currently on the show The Oval, which is something that Tyler Perry apparently produces. I've not seen it. I've never even heard of it until this allegation. Well, Derek Dixon claims that he met Tyler Perry back in 2019. And at that time, Tyler Perry approached him at a party and they exchanged information and talked about Derek Dixon, of course, wanting to be or being an actor. So that they exchanged information. From there, they became friends. Derek Dixon claims that he spent the night at Tyler Perry's home after a party and that Tyler Perry came into the bedroom where he was sleeping, touched his thighs, was advancing on him, told him that he enjoys the company of men. I'm not going to, that's my words for it. I'm not going to get graphic with what he actually said, allegedly. And the guy rebuffed him, said, nah, I'm not interested. But then the guy continues to be Tyler Perry's friend. He ends up getting hired to work on the show, The Oval. And then he claims that he has been sexually harassed this entire time and assaulted because, of course, the unwanted contact. So I don't know what to think about this. It's one of those situations where, I don't know. I'm not taking sides. I don't want to victim shame. If it were me personally, and I was in a situation where someone was making advances to me, sexual in nature, and it was not welcome, I would probably not associate with that person again, regardless of the fact. And it has happened to me before. I'm not going to say who, and I'll never say who, but it has happened to me before, actually. And with a political figure, actually, related to radio and television. And it was really awkward. And you know what I did? I didn't associate with that person anymore. And that's what happens when somebody makes you awkward. You just back out of the situation. And this Derek Dixon, though, continued into the situation. So knowing that Tyler Perry was interested in him, allegedly, he continued to be friends with him. He continued to work with him, and he pursued extra work, on the set of the Oval. So I sometimes when I see these allegations, I just don't know what to think. But it's been a fairly big story, in some networks, I guess, but I don't really know what to think. Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Linda. And so I don't know what to think about that, but I know that I'm hearing that Tyler Perry, of course, does not want that story out there. Who would want that information out there about you? I've heard stories before about Tyler Perry being interested in men. That's certainly no crime. A person has the right to be interested in anyone they want to be interested in. But for the life of me, I will never understand how, whether you're a woman or whether you're a man, if somebody's making unwanted advances towards you, just cut the contact, just walk away, move away, don't go back, don't associate with them. And then if you continue that contact and you escalate that contact with this person, and you're giving them, in my opinion, the okay to say your advances are fine with me because I'm continuing to pursue this relationship with you. And then when that person continues those advances towards you, how can you turn around and then try to sue them, for misconduct? Am I wrong in thinking this way? I don't get it. I don't get it. And that's the reason why I want to talk about it. If anyone is pursuing you, if anyone is making unwanted advances towards you, please cut the contact and walk away. That's how you escape further things happening. And we hear this happening with young people often who are impressionable. They don't always understand, that walking away is the best option. Then the next thing you know, not only do those unwanted advances escalate, but sometimes it can turn into a very dangerous situation. We have to make sure people know whenever you're being pursued by someone you're not interested in, just cut contact and walk away. It's really that easy. So then you start asking yourself, gee, are they really just looking for money? Do they really just want a job? Who knows? Who knows? We'll kind of update on that story as it comes across. And something else I wanted to jump into, it was the Genius Act. Donald Trump, I'm going to read these key points to you on the Genius Act. Donald Trump has been all about the crypto, all about the crypto. And so he is signing the Genius Act. And I really wonder, a lot of people speculate, is it going to be XRP? Is it about Bitcoin? Various stable coins. And is it Doge? I don't think it's going to be Doge. I wish it were, because gosh knows I'd be a wealthy Doge owner if it were, versus being in the hole on my Doge. But we're planning to back the stable coins with the US dollar, which I think is pretty interesting. And then we're going to increase, of course, the tracking of crypto, whereas there's so much fraud that takes place in the crypto world. And I know several people who have left their work as police officers or the FBI or these various, law enforcement organizations to work in the crypto field. And for a while there, I thought, that's a really good idea, because there is so much fraud that takes place in crypto. And then things kind of died down a little bit. People weren't buying as I still do. I still buy crypto. I continue to buy crypto, not in big increments anymore, but I do still continue to think that somewhere down the line, crypto is going to come back into play, and it's going to be a pretty major thing, not just here in this country, but all across the world. And that's because the dollar continues to decrease. And we've got to start thinking, what is increasing? Well, a lot of times it is crypto. I have XRP that has continued to increase in value. Anything has its dips, its lulls, and highs. And, crypto is no different from that. But I feel like our dollar just continues to go down. And I wanted to read you this this graph here that I have about the US dollar. And I'm kind of surprised by this. 9.4% less. The US dollar is worth 9.4% less than it was just at the beginning of 2025. Now, we can get into why that is. We don't have time for all that today because we've got a lot of important things to talk about. But, and of course, that's coming off the heels of a Biden era. No question it's going to be worth a lot less. Hopefully, it will continue to, at some point, start spiking up. But in the meantime, I think crypto is where it's at. And I know for whatever reason, us conservatives, we can't seem to grip crypto. I know a lot of conservative people who are absolutely 100% against crypto. And I know a lot of liberals, Democrats somehow are in the crypto world. But we as conservatives, and I've been talking about this for years, we've got to get with it. We've got to get with the technology. We've got to get with the ins and outs of the crypto market, because it is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Donald Trump has spoken at the last couple of Bitcoin conferences. He's talked about mining Bitcoin and other crypto. Other countries mine for various forms of crypto. If we're doing that here in the United States, I haven't heard about it from a government perspective, but it's certainly something we could be doing. And I think that market is going to continue to evolve. And now, I am not a financial expert, so do not take my advice. Do not go run out and buy a bunch of crypto or drop your US dollars or anything else. But what I personally do is I go in, I use various wallets. I use Atomic Wallet as my primary holding place for my crypto. I learned my lesson. And the way crypto works is that you go out and you find your platform. I use Uphold. Some people, I used to use Voyager, and then of course Voyager went bankrupt, and I lost a ton of money because I was dumb, and I kept my crypto in Voyager on the platform because the exchange, Voyager, Uphold are exchanges. Atomic is your wallet. That's where you hold things. So the exchanges, you're changing back and forth. You're buying, you're selling, etc. And I was mostly buying, not really doing a lot of selling. Now, I didn't put a lot of money into crypto at the beginning. I had bought a bunch of Dogecoin back in, gosh, I don't know. It was back when it was like 0.0006, a lot of zeros in a six. And I bought quite a bit of it. I was at one time a Dogecoin millionaire. And but then what I did is I sold, when it started going up, I sold some of my Dogecoin, and I started diversifying and buying a bunch of other crypto with that. So that's what I did there. And I'm kind of glad I did that, because Doge, of course, has tanked. I still have a ton of Doge, but I now have diversified to a lot of other things. And at one point, my portfolio was quite good, but I was holding it all on the exchange. Do not do that. I didn't transfer it over to my wallet because I was constantly buying more and watching the markets go up and down. And my wallet didn't always support every type of crypto I bought, but I would take, let's say $20. You can take $20. You can buy $5 of this, $5 of that, $10 of that, and just kind of diversify amongst those different ones. And I know people who say only buy XRP. I know people who say only buy Bitcoin. So we need to probably talk a little bit more about crypto as we move on, because that is a big project of Donald Trump. It's not going away. It is absolutely not going away. I am about cash. I prefer to use cash, but I feel like cash is so antiquated. Not to me. I like to use cash, but I was with my mom the other day. We were at a store, and I can't remember what it was she bought right now, but it was $2. And oh, no, I take that back. It was $1.99, $1.99 and 99 cents. And so she gave the guy $2 and a penny. Was that right? Maybe my brain's not thinking right. But either way, it should have been pretty easy. Oh no, I take that back. She gave him a $10 and a penny. And so he should have given her back $8. So technically it was $1.99. She gave him $10 and one penny. And somehow this guy gave her like 50 cents or 46 cents and $13 or something. And I'm looking at this like, what in the world is happening in here? It should have been an easy equation to count out, especially when you're using a cash register that's digital. But I don't think a lot of people these days know how to count cash. So I always think that's interesting. I don't have young children, but if I did, I would be practicing with them daily, on how do you count cash back. Of course, us old folks back in the day, if you ever worked in any type of retail situation, you had to count back money all the time. There was no cash register to tell you how to count cash back. So you had to learn, of course, and that does kind of stick with you over time. But these young folks, they just don't know. They don't know how to write a signature. They don't have a signature. Their signature is printed. They can't use it on ballots. They can't use it on legal forms. And man, it's like, where did we go wrong? So many different ways. That's where we went wrong. And Mary says, "Good morning, all. I'm either too early or too late for the show." Hey, Mary, at least you're here. That is all that matters. All that matters. So, a lot of stuff to talk about. I know the most obvious thing we definitely need to get to is the situation in Iran and Israel, and what we need to do to prepare. We're heading into some unsettling times. And it's unsettling because even for me, I don't know what direction to go in. I keep thinking in my head, I do not support the United States going to war because I'm against war. I don't support that. Now, unless we're directly threatened, if somebody lobs a missile over here into, the United States, yeah, we're going to war. If somebody attacks us here on our American soil at our American military bases or our ships, etc., if they attack our troops, then yes, we're going to war. Then I'm 100% for it, which is why you have to worry about false flags, of course, because, that's what most Americans feel, is that if we as Americans are attacked directly, then we're all for war. That gets us all on board, doesn't it? And and the situation is that we don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen. Donald Trump yesterday gave the approval to attack Iran, but he was sitting on it. He said, "I'm going to wait and see," because good reasoning. I don't know what he's thinking, what he's waiting to see. But does Iran really have nuclear weapons? Or are they that close to creating a nuclear weapon? You know, Russia has given a pretty stark warning to us now, and I think he's probably taking that into consideration. Putin stated that he spoke with China's President Xi, and they had a conversation about Israel and Iran. China came out of that with President Xi saying that Israel needs to immediately stop the escalation. They need to stop sending missiles over to Iran. We have Putin stating that, again, the aggression needs to stop. Now, he's not one to talk. And I'm sure that's exactly what Donald Trump told him. Donald Trump talking to Putin, I believe that was yesterday, and it was either the day before or yesterday. And I'm sure that Donald Trump said, "Hey, Putin, look what's going over in your backyard. Stay out of our business," is what I'm guessing. But part of how things are escalating with Russia is that Iran, of course, has been just barraging Israel with these missiles, just absolutely slamming them. And yes, Israel is attacking Iran as well, but not nearly the same. And I'm going to show you a video in a minute of the Iranian defense system, it's pretty good. It might actually be better than the Iron Dome. There are still some missiles coming through, but they're doing a really good job intercepting these. Now, they're not doing as good of a job with the drone attacks. Now, Israel has drones. They're coming in, they're doing a really great job attacking some of these different targets within Iran with the drones. And Iran has been pretty successful stopping a lot of their, much more than I expected, much more than I expected. Now, Israel, on the other hand, was announced today by even the New York Times that stated that part of the issue with Israel is that they're running out of interceptors. In Iran's, we've talked about this every day. Iran's strategy seems to be, it's just speculation, seems to be to just throw as many missiles as they can at Israel, and some of them will get through because they just overwhelm the Iron Dome system, which is really only meant to intercept a single or a couple of missiles coming through at a time. They probably maybe never thought they'd be in a situation where there's 20, 30 missiles coming through at once, and then they throw in a little hypersonic missile here and there. And the issue is that Iran, they produce their own missiles and their own interceptors right there in Iran. And some people say, well, they're also coming in from China. We don't, possibly, but we also know that Iran does produce them right there in Iran. Now, Israel, on the other hand, they do have some production of their interceptors, but most of it takes place in East Camden, Arkansas. And their missiles are produced mostly here in the United States by Raytheon. And we just can't keep up the production. So they're, lobbing out their missiles quicker than we can produce more. And same as for their interceptors. So now they're rationing interceptors. And Israel has stated that they're only going to use their interceptors for missiles that appear to have that are targeting their high priority assets. So that, I don't know where that's going to leave Israel in this situation. And that means Iran has a little bit more of an opportunity and an advantage to get into some of these areas and cause some structural damage. Not to, of course, some of these key areas that Iran would like to target. Israel's still going to protect those. Todd says maybe he's waiting on our ships to get in place. Yeah, and I think that's about to happen. And Mary says DJT will be criticized no matter what he does. That is 100% true. And somebody says it's so easy to count back cash. Yeah, I worked for Famous Bar. Yep, I remember Famous Bar. So I don't know what Donald Trump is waiting for. He might be just waiting to see how things play out. But yesterday, one of the strikes that Israel took against Iran was against their nuclear facilities. This happened overnight, and they claimed, and I want to make sure I give you the exact one that they're talking about because it is important to know. And these so Israel claimed they struck, and I'm sure I'm not saying this, so forgive me when I butcher these names. Bashir nuclear facility, Isfahan, Natanz. I know I'm not saying any of those right. So then they backtracked it. They said, oh, wait a minute, we misspoke because Russia's like, hey, wait a minute. So Boucher, I have no idea. I need to take some, I guess, pronunciation classes in some of these foreign names. Well, that's an active nuclear facility. And Russia stood up and Putin's like, hey, wait a minute. I have hundreds of Russian scientists working within that nuclear facility. That one needs to be hands off because we're not leaving. We're not going anywhere. And then Putin went further to say that Iran has the right to create peaceful nuclear activity. So what that exactly means, I don't know. Or is he trying to say that Iran has the right to have a nuclear weapon? I mean, there's people who might say that's true. I mean, all these other countries have nuclear weapons. Why can't Iran have one too? Now, we all know the answer to that because they will not use it as with the restraint that many other countries will. And it'll create an arms race. Like we've talked about it, a couple different days this week, it'll create an arms race in the Middle East. Then we'll have Egypt and Jordan, all these other countries, rushing in to create nuclear weapons, which we certainly don't want that to happen. And we already know these nuclear weapons are getting in the wrong hands as it is. So we need to limit that capacity. And Mary says, what was the deal with China flying in supplies? That was true for Iran. Those were, well, I've not heard about them flying in supplies. I know that, Mary, they've had cargo ships. That was one of the things I was going to talk about yesterday before the show cut off, is that allegedly China has sent over several cargo ships. And everyone's really speculating on what's on those cargo ships. And some people think it's missiles. It's tough to know about Iran because they're never Israel, I believe, tells us the truth about how many missiles they have, what kind of missiles they have, what their general strategy is. I think Netanyahu's been very forthright talking about it. He's not beating around the bush. He said, "Hey, we're going to change the regime." He said, "We're not going to allow them to have nuclear weapons." He has stated a lot of factual information. I don't feel like he's trying to hide the fact that this is about a regime change. And he's also stated that it's not off the table to eliminate the Ayatollah Khomeini. So I think he's been very straightforward. Iran, on the other hand, you really just have no idea what they're doing. You really have no idea. We already know we cannot trust China. Look at all the Chinese nationals that have been arrested just recently in the United States for bringing over all these biological weapons. We just cannot trust China. And we don't know. Iran claims they have, what I think they said that they claimed in the beginning they had 30 or 3,000 missiles, and somebody else said 30,000 missiles. I don't think that's the case. And they started these big barrages against Israel, 20, 30 missiles at a time. And again, they would throw in that hypersonic missile every once in a while. Well, then yesterday, everything kind of changed. They weren't having these big barrages of missiles like they had been the days before. They were bringing out the big guns. They had a couple really big missiles they sent over to Israel yesterday, but they sent them by themselves, just one at a time. And Israel easily, their Iron Dome easily intercepted, some of these larger missiles because that's what the Iron Dome is made to do. Now, it cannot intercept hypersonic missiles, but I'll tell you what, one of the missiles that Iran launched yesterday, that Fatah, I think is how they call it, hypersonic missile, and it's supposed to be undetectable. But Israel had no problem intercepting that particular missile. So I'm sure Iran was quite disappointed. But we don't know what Iran really has in their stockpile. And we don't know who has helped them, who has assisted them, who is still helping them. A lot of speculation yesterday that they were running out of missiles or maybe missile launchers because so many of their launchers have been destroyed by Israel that they didn't really have the capability of launching these big barrages of missiles any longer. And then lo and behold, last night in the middle of the night, they did the same thing. They started launching 20, 30 missiles at a time. They hit a lot of key Israeli infrastructure, and there will be a price to pay for that today. And I'll show you a couple videos here, but it was pretty devastating, really, to watch. And thankfully, there were injuries, no deaths reported. And of course, I'm going to backtrack on that. Neither country is going to report the true number of casualties. That just doesn't happen. So that's just how war works. Not faulting anyone for doing that because you don't want to give your enemy any strategic information and you don't want them to think that they're successful in harming your citizens, of course. But we know that Israel launched that missile, a barrage of missiles yesterday, one striking the Soroka hospital right there in the middle of Tel Aviv. Now, Israel or Iran claims that they were actually targeting a military installation right next to the hospital. I'm going to show you the photo of the couple second video that Iran said they were really doing versus the hospital that was damaged. Now, the hospital was damaged. The building that Iran claims was a military installation that was housing tanks was completely destroyed. And if you look at the hospital, I mean, Israel claims that even though the hospital was damaged, that they can still continue on with operations. And by operations, I don't mean surgeries. I mean business as usual. So we're going to look at that really quick. And Todd says, crazy to think Missouri is about as 8 times bigger than Israel. Todd, that's exactly right. And I'm glad you said that because we've talked about that this week a little bit in that Iran is huge. It's absolutely huge. And so those Israeli strikes going into Iran, they're strategic. They're hitting their nuclear facilities. They're hitting their military installations. They're looking for their launchers, their missile launchers, or, very strategic in nature. Now, they did take out that news station, and then Iran, of course, retaliated and took out an Israeli news station, that tit for tat, we've been talking about. But I'm going to show you this video here really quick. Let me find it here. Now, this is what Iran claims they were trying to strike. They're claiming that this is where military is. So you can see that there. Then I'm going to show you the strike at the hospital, which is a large building there. You can't really see it. It's down in between these big buildings. But you can see that decimated area. That's where that flat building was next to the hospital. And so, is Iran, were they aiming for a hospital? A lot of people speculate they actually were targeting the hospital, that they're just making up lies, that they thought there was a military installation there. Other people say it's 100% confirmed that Israel did have tanks stored underground in that area. You just don't know the truth. You can only speculate. I don't trust Iran, so I don't trust anything the Iranian government says. Elliot, you're probably right. Elliot says Russian scientists were removed long ago. And you're right, Elliot. And that brings up a good point. And we need to talk about Russia because I think that has a lot to do with any strategy we have going forward. And again, going back to Putin stating that he has hundreds of scientists at this, I've got to look at it because I don't know how to say it. Boucher, Boucher nuclear facility. It's an active nuclear facility. And yesterday, Israel claimed they struck it, and then they backtracked and said, "No, we didn't. We didn't touch that one." And that was just a mistake in communication. And then Russia saying, "You know what? Our scientists aren't going anywhere." But that could be a bluff. And that's something that Donald Trump probably has to decipher. Where do we go from here? Of course. And Mary says, take out the Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini. I agree, Mary. I'm not against that. As much as I hate to say something like that, I'm not against that. And yesterday they were striking in and around the area where he is housed. I think that's as a warning, not necessarily trying to strike him, but just saying, hey, this is how easy it is. But that guy does not care. He said he will never surrender. And they published a list yesterday of some of the victims of the Israeli strikes. And he said they're all martyrs. And so they don't care. The Ayatollah supreme leader, the government, they do not care in Iran. We are all just collateral damage. They don't care how many civilians are killed in their country. Like he said, they will never surrender. And Mary says, I don't want them coming to the White House to talk. No trust in Iran. They will definitely not be coming to the White House. And Daddy says, what's under Denver, Colorado airport? What's under here's the better question for you, Dottie. I don't think you're in Denver. I think you're in North Carolina. But for us folks here in St. Louis, what's under Lambert Airport? Because I'll tell you what, Lambert Airport goes down many stories below the ground. And I know this because I know somebody who works down there no longer, but as a matter of fact, this guy that I know, he was a general, retired general, and he worked directly for the J8 team at the Pentagon. And he's the one who told me so much information about 9/11, which we can talk about sometime. And he was visiting St. Louis, a week out of every month, and he was working at this underground facility under Lambert Airport. And I can't remember how many stories he told me it went down, but it was many. And so, that's our threat here, in the St. Louis area. If we're attacked during this escalation, St. Louis is definitely on that target list, something to think about. A lot of areas, East Camden, Arkansas, on the target list, believe it or not, because they, of course, produce those interceptors for Israel. But the strikes are going to continue. Now, I really thought that we, the United States, would have already reacted. I really did. Now we're ready. I mean, we are ready. We've got our ships, nearly in place. We've got 2 intelligence ships in place. We have those intelligence ships are there. They can hack signals, they can scramble different types of signals, they can detect an EMP or other type of device. So they're very important. Of course, yesterday we were talking about Ted Cruz, who says the guy's a complete moron, but he says that his concern is that if we don't take out Iran, they're going to launch an EMP attack against the United States. And they certainly could. They certainly could. And we're going to talk about what could happen right here in our own country in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about President Trump and his decision. Again, he's given the okay to attack Iran. We know that. And he has not yet ordered the strike. And as a matter of fact, I'm just shocked. I really thought today I'd be coming in to the show talking about that strike and where we are now after the strike occurred. And it hasn't happened yet. I do absolutely think it's going to happen. I really do. I do not think that Iran is going to come to the negotiating table as much as everybody talks about them negotiating. I don't know what happened again with the meeting with Putin and Donald Trump. They had a telephone call. I know that Russia has given us a very stark warning that we should not get involved. And if we do get involved, there will be consequences to our actions. And that leads me to believe that Donald Trump is probably really contemplating, is this worth the United States getting involved? Because we will potentially lose American lives. And I'm sure he's sitting there thinking, how do I want my presidency to go down? How do I want to be remembered in history? If we join Israel and we attack, use our, let's say, our bunker buster onto the nuclear facility, the Fort nuclear facility, what's going to happen? Is Russia going to come after us? Is China? Is all of BRICS going to go to war with us, the United States? But if we don't do it, Israel's going to lose this war. And I'm sorry for all of those of you who disagree with me, but Israel will come also to that decision-making point. They're showing restraint. They can wipe out Iran in a touch of a button, no question about it. They are superior militarily to anything Iran has, but they also are facing the same decisions that Donald Trump is, that if we go too far, we're going to have all of BRICS fighting with us. And I'm sure that's something Netanyahu is certainly thinking about. And as one of you just stated, Israel is smaller than the state of Missouri. And do you really want all of BRICS coming at you? And the answer is probably absolutely no, because while Israel and the United States can wipe Iran off the face of the map, well, BRICS can wipe Israel off the face of the map. So I'm sure that's something that they are contemplating. And I'm sure it's something that Donald Trump is contemplating. I personally, and this is only my opinion, and it means absolutely nothing, but my opinion is that Donald Trump is going to make the decision to assist Israel. We see everything falling into place. I think, as somebody said on the comment line, he's probably waiting for the ships to get into the right areas. He's waiting for that last little I to be dotted, T to be crossed before he makes that decision to go ahead. And then when that happens, how will it play out? It's going to be, of course, I would guess the first strike will be probably the bunker buster, and you've probably heard how that works. The bunker buster, the plane flies through, they drop that first bomb, that kind of makes way for the second. They throw that second one in there, and it fully destroys whatever type of facility they're looking to attack. And when that happens, boy, where do we go from there? We saw yesterday a lot of activity. Israel flew over 60 fighter jets across Iran and hit a lot of their very strategic sites, a lot of their military infrastructure, a lot of their missile launchers. Unfortunately, not enough of their missile launchers, because they're still, just this morning when I was starting the show, Iran was still sending missiles over to over to Israel. Iran was continuing to attack them. And I wanted to show you a little bit of a video, because these are some Chinese, let me find this here. These are some Chinese nationals in Iran, and they were phototaping. Well, they're in Iraq, but they're phototaping these missiles being launched from Iran. It's pretty crazy to look at. Oh wait, that's the wrong video. Sorry, this one. Sometimes my computer does the wrong one.
这个，哦，我靠！
Now you would think it would be pretty easy for Israel to come in, or and just wipe out those missile launchers, but they just can't get all of them, and they continue to launch those attacks. I feel like if we don't do something, if I'm not going to get into my thoughts about supporting or not supporting, because I am so caught in the middle. I don't want to see one American life lost for any reason, unless we are directly attacked first. I don't want to see one American life lost. I do not want us to participate in this war. I hate it to say that, because I do support Israel and I support the people the Israelis, but I just don't want to see it happen. And then we have Democrats. I keep wondering, well, what do Democrats think? And then I start thinking, well, maybe I'm on the wrong side because the Democrats, here they are. And then I start rethinking my position. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I am for joining the war because I cannot possibly side with these people who are trying to protect Iran. That's not what I want. I want a regime change. I want to disable any of their nuclear facilities, destroy their nuclear facilities. I just don't want any American lives lost, and I don't want to see the fallout that we might face. And Dottie or Mary, no, I have not. I'm going to talk about that right now. Good morning, Scott, because we don't have a whole lot of time left. You know, I've been preparing for any type of situation for quite some time now. And I'm not saying that people need to run to the hills to prepare for any type of impending war. We're not there yet. Donald Trump has not even given the order yet to participate. And we won't know about that order, by the way, until after it has already happened. You know, it's not going to be one of those situations where somebody say, oh, here we go on live TV. We're going to destroy, this nuclear facility. It doesn't work that way. They're going to do it. Then we're going to hear about it. We'll start hearing reports coming in. I think it's going to happen, but I've been saying that for the past couple of days. This morning, right before we were coming onto the show, I heard from an anonymous source. I cannot confirm it. It may absolutely not be true, but they were talking on one of these back channels that I'm part of that's in Iran, and another one that's in Israel that I kind of bounce back and forth between these groups. And they were saying that U.S. military bases in the Middle East are on lockdown, that they've told all personnel to shelter in place. And now, of course, that usually means they're expecting Iran to probably launch missiles at our U.S. bases, or the Houthis or Hezbollah or someone else, because or Israel did take out the Hezbollah leader yesterday in Lebanon. So we've got a lot of different potential enemies that could be coming at us. But it also could mean that they're ready to make that first strike. And when they do, they probably know the first thing Iran's going to do, and the Houthis and Hezbollah and all these other paramilitary groups, is they're going to strike our military bases. So that'll be the first thing that happens. The minute we probably launch that bunker buster, they're going to hit those buttons. Those missiles are going to go right into our military bases. In the Middle East, bound to happen. Iraq has came out and made statements. They said, please, Iran, do not attack U.S. military bases in Iraq. We don't want that here. But that's not going to stop Iran from doing such a thing. And then we got to start thinking, well, what's going to happen right here? How is this going to affect us? And I'm going to tell you right now, the military is concerned. Whether you want to believe it or you don't want to believe it, they are concerned. A friend of mine, I was talking to her last night, and her significant other is a veteran, and he banks where all the other military members bank. And he said there's like a run for money right now. Everybody's trying to get their money out of the bank, to the extent where he couldn't even get in to get his own money out because it was just overwhelmed, with military members trying to withdraw cash because they know what's coming. Now, take that with a grain of salt. It was told to me firsthand, not secondhand, not thirdhand, not hearsay, not something I saw on the internet. It was told to me firsthand. And so take that for what you will. But we all know in a time of war, what's the first thing that happens is the banks kind of go on their own little lockdown. We've never had to deal with that here in the United States, quite honestly, but we've seen it happen in so many different countries, how things play out. So it's pretty easy to see how things might play out here. And I'm not going to say you'll never get access to your money or that you need to go to the bank and withdraw every penny you have, but it's always good to have cash on hand, because guess what Iran is really good at, and that's hacking. We see it. They're hacking Israel like crazy. They have hacked into the Iron Dome system. Yesterday, Iran hacked into their warning system, and instead of, when the missiles were coming over, instead of playing the warning signal, it was playing some type of Iranian propaganda. So they're very good at hacking. And Israel's really good at hacking too. But Iran could easily hack our banking system. They can hack into a lot of our very critical infrastructure. So those are some things to think about. They don't have to launch a missile into the United States to cause us an awful lot of problems. They're talking about closing up that Strait of Hormuz. And if that happens, that's really going to significantly impact not only the price of oil, but how much gasoline is available to us at your various local gas stations. Because as we know, a lot of the oil comes through that strait. And so that's something we definitely have to be concerned with. And again, I'm not saying that you have to run out today, go to your bank and take all your money out. I'm not telling you to head for the hills, but I'm telling you that you probably should at least be semi prepared. Now, Colonel Joe Adams yesterday said that they're having a muster this Saturday. They're going to be talking about preparedness, and you can reach out to him at thewashingtonguard.com if you want to come out as a guest. That's out in Washington, Missouri. But a lot of you are probably too far to do that. For me personally, my own preparation is that I am definitely, and the banks are closed today, by the way, too. Today is a federal holiday. It's Juneteenth. So the postal office is closed, the banks are closed. You can go to the ATM. My advice would be get some money out of the ATM. If you have some cash on hand, have some, but you should do that anyway. All people should do that anyway. Be prepared if things get ugly to cook outdoors. Have some propane available if you can. Have some wood available to cook. I always think the main priorities for me is to make sure that I have cash on hand in case the credit card or debit card or financial institutions are hacked. I always make sure that I have a way to cook outside in case our power grid is attacked. And I have been preparing this for a long time. I could never cook inside. I could cook outside all the time. I've bought a ton of cast iron pans and skillets and everything else. I've got propane, I've got wood, I've got everything I need to cook outside. So that's something to think about. Most of you probably already have food. I don't think we're having any kind of situation right now where we need to stock up for like 6 months of food. I don't think we're going to escalate to any type of nuclear situation. I don't see that happening. And if it did, you can't prepare for that anyway. I think the most thing that we have to prepare for is there could potentially be attacks on our power grid. There could be a hacking into, again, a lot of different infrastructure. Now in my house, I have a stream outside, so I already have fresh water. But it's always good to make sure you have water on hand and gasoline. Now, one thing I am going to do today is I am going to go to the gas station. I am going to have a few gallons of gas on hand because if something happens, I may not want to be at my house. I may want to make sure I have gas in my car instead of standing and waiting in a line to get gasoline. Something that I want to remind you of before anyone says that's going too far, there's nothing we need to prepare for. There's nothing we need to worry about. And that is that, there's over 1,500 sleeper cells, according to our intelligence agencies, Iranian sleeper cells right here in the United States. Not to mention, okay, that's just Iranian sleeper cells. How many Islamic radical terrorists are in our country? I couldn't even put a number on that. I don't even know, but I would guess it's in the many thousands. 1,500 sleeper cells, many thousands of Iranian sympathizers right here in the United States. And we already know that these people are just waiting for the call. They're just waiting. And we already know that these groups like Al Qaeda, some of these other folks are giving the call to all of their Islamic brothers and sisters to say, hey, if the United States gets involved in this war against Iran, that this is going to be our call up to become a martyr, to our martyrdom. So think about that. And again, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not trying to make anyone afraid. That's not the goal. And it's just about being prepared because you always should be prepared for anything that comes your way. And let's see, Mary says, gas barbecue grill. Yes, and if you have a barbecue grill, obviously that's great. Make sure you have wood. You can cook on your open wood. That's actually the best way of cooking. Andrew says sleeper cells are the issue. Andrew, you're 100% correct. 1,500 of them is what our government claims we have in this country. Good morning, Mandy. And yes, sleeper cells are what terrifies me. Me too, Mandy. And the problem is you can't really protect yourself against these sleeper cells or against other radical terror groups that are here in the United States because, if they strike us, it's going to be at places you wouldn't think, the grocery store, the movie theaters, potentially. It's going to be driving down the highway. We hadn't talked about it yet here, but there's been a lot of reports out about the government, the DMV somehow I don't even know how this all came about, but the DMV giving out all of these permits, these light driver's licenses to people who are in our country illegally to drive our semi trucks. And you have to worry about semi trucks and what might they do? They're a rolling catastrophe, a rolling weapon. So again, I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm not going to get too crazy about it today. We'll see how things unfold as we go. But my advice to any American right now is you should have some cash on hand. I'm not saying take every penny out. Have some cash on hand. Hacking is a big threat. Make sure you have sources to cook outside because you may not be able to cook in your house if for some reason you don't have power. And if you have a generator, you might want to save that until you really need it and not use it right at the beginning because I'll tell you, we don't know where this is going. And, we're just talking about the immediate threat of sleeper cells, of radical terrorists in our country who might carry out indiscriminate attacks across the United States. But what we really haven't talked about, we'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow, is what happens if BRICS gets involved. Because we've gotten some very serious warnings already, again, from Putin and President Xi of China, who are telling Donald Trump, do not get involved in this war. And if you do, you will regret it. And what does that mean? And how does that affect us? And I'll tell you, we militarily, we have a fantastic military. We are not prepared to go to war against BRICS. We are not prepared for it. And I'm not downing our military because they are fantastic. But we know under Joe Biden, we defunded some of our military programs. We know that they were working harder on diversifying our military as far as DEI than they were strengthening our military. Our military became weak under the Biden administration. And while under Donald Trump, we're turning that around, we're getting everything in order. We're not ready for a war. We don't have the stockpiles of fuel and everything that we need to go to war against BRICS. So those are some things to think about. And we'll be talking more, about that tomorrow. But in the meantime, my plan for today, and I kid you not, this is my plan. Now, not today. I'm not going to be out. I've got to work today. I'm not going to be out doing these things myself. So I'm having somebody do them for me. But or maybe I'll be out later this evening getting my supplies together. I already have propane, but I'm going to buy more propane. I already have cash on hand. I'm going to have more cash on hand. I'm already prepared to cook outside, but I'm going to get more prepared. And I already have water saved. Again, I have a stream outside, but I'm going to get more prepared. I'm going to go buy a couple more jugs to have some more water bottled up just in case I'm not able to run out to where the water's located outside, which I don't expect it to be that crazy, but you never know. Better to be handy. And also, I don't know, I have fresh stream water, but what if it's contaminated? I'd rather have non-contaminated water. Propane's a big one for me, probably. Propane, wood, having cash on hand. Those are the bigger things that I'm worried about. Having a supply of food that I can easily cook outside, having pans. A lot of people don't think about that. They think, oh, I can easily cook outside. I've got a barbecue grill. Well, what if your power goes out? You're going to have all of those items in your freezer. You can't probably cook them all in one day. And then if you do, how are you going to ration that out, potentially over a period of time? And so you got to start thinking about what can you cook? And do you have cookware to do so? Because please do not use one of your nonstick pans out on on a fire. Don't do that. It'll be toxic and it'll be a big disaster. Just don't do it. I've been for probably the past 2 years, I've been stocking up on cast iron pans. So I am fully ready to. I've got every gadget you can think of to cook outside. Maybe I'll have a big barbecue. But you got to make sure you have food you can cook outside, as well as, of course, the utensils and everything else to use outside. And hopefully we don't need to worry about any of this. Donald Trump may change his mind. We may not end up joining Israel, but I see it going that way. And I wish I could be more supportive and more positive and say, let's go in there and get Iran and take out the regime and take out the Ayatollah and take care of that nuclear facility. But I also know it's just not that easy. If somebody could assure me right now that we, the United States, could fly that bunker buster over there and destroy that Fordow nuclear facility and take out the Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, or just put him in exile somewhere where he's not making any decisions and put a new regime in place, and then everything's it. That's it. That's the end of the story. We all go about our happy days and the people of Iran are restored to peace and blah, 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 that would be fantastic. I'd be all for it. But I don't see that happening. I think the minute we make that strike is the minute that they push those buttons and attack our military. And once they attack our military, this is going to become a full-on war. And then we're going to have BRICS involved, and Russia and China, and I think it's going to become a very complicated disaster, is what I think. So we'll see how it all plays out. But in the meantime, definitely, if I were you, I'd make some minimal preparations, get ready for potentially not having, let's say, power or water or access to cash for 2 weeks or so. I can't imagine it'd be longer than that unless things get super crazy, but be prepared at least for a few days without those amenities. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow. We'll see what's going on. There's a lot more in the news to talk about. Lots more to talk about. I was kind of see if anything breaking came through while we were talking, because I'll tell you what, it is nonstop. So I'm sorry, it'll take me a second to look, but I want to see if there's any. Let's see here. Iran is striking Israel right now as we speak. I just saw where they've just now launched missiles, and BRICS is making more threats towards us. These are all things that have been going on in the past couple minutes. So we'll talk more about that probably tomorrow. Every day, I think we're going to come in and start out the show with some just crazy things going on. But so far, it's just tit for tat, back and forth. Donald Trump waiting to make that move. So that's about it for me today. I don't really have a lot more to talk about. Seems like there was something else I was going to talk about, but if I forgot something, we will cover it tomorrow. In the meantime, we'll see how those tit for tat strikes play out today. We'll see if Donald Trump gives that go ahead for that strike against Iran, and then we'll see where we go from there. I do hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Of course, I'll be posting on social media throughout probably the day and the evening with any new information. Then tomorrow morning, of course, we'll certainly have the latest. So thanks, guys. Hope you have a great day, and I will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.